I remember the road being completely empty, not quiet in the way cities are quiet late at night. This was a different kind of silence, the kind that stretches for miles in every direction. Just desert, sky, and a single narrow highway cutting through the sand like a scar. I had been driving for hours. The sun was already leaning toward the horizon, turning the entire landscape orange and gold. The heat still rose from the asphalt, distorting the air ahead of me. Every few minutes the road shimmered like water, the kind of mirage you see in old desert movies. It was peaceful, too peaceful maybe. Out there you start to understand how small you really are. No buildings, no towns, no traffic. Just a thin ribbon of road surrounded by endless sand and rock. My phone had lost signal nearly an hour earlier, but that didn't worry me. I knew the next town was still ahead. According to the map I had checked before losing reception, it wasn't far, maybe 40 miles. I remember rolling down the window slightly to let the air in. The desert wind rushed into the car, hot and dry, carrying the faint smell of dust. At first it felt refreshing. Then I noticed something strange on the horizon, a dark band stretching across the distance. At first I thought it was clouds, storm clouds gathering low against the desert floor. But the sky above me was still clear, blue, calm. The band moved slowly at first, almost too slowly to notice unless you stared at it. But something about it felt wrong. It wasn't rising, it was growing. I squinted through the windshield. The line was thicker now, darker, spreading wider across the horizon like ink bleeding through paper. That's when I realized what I was looking at. A sandstorm. I had seen videos before. Walls of dust moving across the desert like giant waves. But seeing one in person is different. It doesn't look dramatic at first. It looks distant, harmless. I remember thinking I would simply drive through it. The road ahead was still visible. The storm looked far away, and storms in the desert can pass quickly. So I kept driving. 5 minutes later, the sky began to change color. The sunlight dimmed slightly, as if someone had turned down the brightness of the world. The air outside turned hazy, and the horizon disappeared behind a rising curtain of dust. The wind picked up. Sand began to hit the windshield like tiny grains of gravel. Tick, tick, tick. At first it was light, then the sound grew louder. The wind slammed into the side of the car hard enough to push it slightly across the lane. I tightened my grip on the steering wheel and slowed down. The storm was coming faster than I expected. Within minutes, the blue sky above me turned brown. The wall of dust swallowed the road ahead. Visibility dropped instantly. The world outside the windshield transformed into swirling orange chaos. Sand streaked across the glass in violent waves, carried by wind strong enough to shake the entire vehicle. I slowed to 20 miles per hour, then 10. Soon I could barely see the edge of the road. Driving in a sandstorm is like driving through smoke. Everything loses its shape. Landmarks vanish. The horizon disappears. The world becomes a moving blur of dust and wind. And the worst part is you don't know how big the storm is. Maybe it lasts 5 minutes. Maybe it lasts an hour. Or maybe you're about to drive straight into something you can't see. I decided to pull over. The problem was, I couldn't even see where the shoulder of the road ended. The dust was so thick that the headlights bounced back at me, reflecting off millions of particles in the air. It felt like shining a flashlight into fog. I eased the car slowly to the right and stopped. The engine idled quietly beneath the roar of the wind. Outside, the storm raged. The entire car vibrated as gusts slammed against the metal frame. Sand hit the windows in steady waves, like rain made of dust. For a moment, I simply sat there, waiting. Storms pass, I told myself. They always pass. But minutes stretched longer than I expected. The visibility outside the windshield dropped even further, until I could barely see 10 feet ahead. The road markers disappeared completely beneath drifting sand. The wind howled louder. Then something changed. The car shifted suddenly, not forward, down. My stomach dropped. I opened the door slightly and stepped out into the storm. The wind hit me like a wall. Sand stung my face instantly, forcing my eyes half closed. The air itself felt thick, almost solid, filled with dust swirling in violent currents. I looked down. The rear tire had sunk into loose sand. The shoulder of the road wasn't solid ground. It was a shallow drift, and the storm had pushed enough sand against the car that the wheel had started to sink. I climbed back inside quickly and tried to ease the car forward. The tires spun. Sand sprayed behind me. The car didn't move. I tried again, slower. The tires dug deeper. Within seconds, the rear wheel had buried itself halfway into the sand. That's the moment the situation stopped being inconvenient and started being dangerous. The storm showed no sign of slowing. My phone still had no signal. And now the car, my only shelter in the middle of a desert sandstorm, was stuck. I turned off the engine to save fuel. The silence inside the car felt surreal compared to the chaos outside. Through the windows, the desert had disappeared. The world was just wind and sand. And somewhere beyond that storm, the nearest town was still 40 miles away. I sat there listening to the storm for a long time, long enough for doubt to creep in. If the storm lasted hours, the drifting sand could bury the wheels completely. If that happened, the car might not be able to move even after the storm ended. And if the car stayed trapped, I would be stranded in the desert. The thought of walking crossed my mind, but stepping outside again reminded me how impossible that would be. The wind erased all sense of direction. 10 steps away from the car and I could already barely see it. Anyone who has never been in a sandstorm imagines it like heavy fog. It isn't. Fog is soft. A sandstorm feels alive. The wind grabs at your clothes. Sand cuts into your skin. The air fills your mouth and nose until breathing feels like inhaling dust. Walking into that blindly would be like walking into the ocean during a hurricane. So I waited. Minutes passed, then an hour. The storm raged on, relentless. The desert outside remained invisible. And for the first time that day, a quiet realization settled into my mind. Out here, in a place with no signal, no traffic, and no shelter. If something went wrong, no one would know where I was. The desert wouldn't make a sound. The wind would erase my tracks, and the storm would move on as if nothing had happened. I sat there in the fading light, surrounded by sand and noise, understanding something simple. The desert doesn't have to attack you. It only needs you to underestimate it once, and then it waits.